Carl Gustav Jung is one of the most talked about figures in history, but most people only know a few pieces of the story. Born in the quiet Swiss village of Keswil in 1875, Jung developed a psychological framework that profoundly revealed the hidden depths of the human mind. His initial career saw him train as a psychiatrist, which led to a pivotal collaboration with Sigmund Freud, the widely recognized founder of psychoanalysis. Jung was, for a time, Freud's chosen successor in the early, burgeoning psychoanalytic movement. However, a significant break between the two men occurred in 1913, fueled by Jung's revolutionary insights regarding the unconscious mind. This deep dive will explore Jung's remarkable life, tracing his journey from those early experiences to the development of his groundbreaking theories, and revealing how his work continues to shape our understanding of ourselves. If you enjoy long, deep dives into lives and stories like this, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more. Jung's early life itself was steeped in mystery and supernatural phenomena, an environment that fostered his lasting interest in the invisible forces influencing human behavior. These formative experiences undoubtedly laid the groundwork for his later explorations into the unseen dimensions of the psyche. At the heart of the split between Jung and Freud lay their fundamentally different understandings of the unconscious mind. Freud conceptualized the unconscious primarily as a storage area for repressed sexual desires and traumatic memories. For Freud, these were essentially personal experiences that an individual had pushed out of conscious awareness. Jung's understanding of the unconscious was described as far more profound and complex than Freud's initial model. He recognized the unconscious not merely as a passive repository, but as a dynamic, living system actively shaping conscious experience. Jung observed that many of his patients' dreams, fantasies, and symbols often lacked a direct connection to their personal histories. Instead, these powerful, recurring images presented universal symbols and themes, which appeared consistently across diverse cultures and historical periods. To account for these observations, Jung proposed a two-layer model of the unconscious mind. The first layer, which Jung termed the personal unconscious, comprises all material that has been forgotten or repressed during an individual's lifetime. This personal unconscious includes forgotten childhood memories, repressed emotions, incomplete thoughts, and experiences deemed either too painful or too insignificant for conscious awareness. It functions as a vast repository for all an individual's past experiences, retaining a powerful influence even without conscious access. This influence often manifests through sudden emotional reactions, inexplicable preferences, or automatic responses to specific situations, demonstrating how past experiences continue to shape present behavior from beneath awareness. Jung's second layer of the unconscious, the collective unconscious, was considered his most groundbreaking discovery and represents a truly radical departure from previous psychological thought. The collective unconscious is a deeper realm containing universal patterns of human experience. These universal patterns transcend individual biography and cultural conditioning, suggesting a shared, inherited mental structure. Jung concluded that specific images, themes, and behavioral patterns appear consistently across all human societies. These consistent patterns suggest an emergence from a shared evolutionary heritage, rather than from personal learning or individual experience. The universal elements within the collective unconscious are called archetypes by Jung. Archetypes encompass fundamental human experiences such as birth, death, the mother figure, the wise old man, and the hero's journey, each representing a core human theme. The collective unconscious provides a compelling explanation for why individuals from vastly different backgrounds share similar dreams and create comparable myths and legends. It also explains why people respond to certain symbols in predictable ways, demonstrating a universal resonance within the human psyche. For instance, the image of a great mother figure is present in nearly every culture, including the Christian Virgin Mary, Hindu goddesses, and various ancient Earth Mother deities, illustrating a cross-cultural archetypal pattern. Archetypal patterns manifest spontaneously in dreams, art, literature, and religious experiences, revealing themselves as fundamental structures of human consciousness itself. Jung believed that comprehending these universal patterns could assist individuals in connecting with humanity's deeper wisdom. This understanding could also help individuals find profound meaning in their personal struggles, seeing them as variations of universal human experiences. Jung determined that the unconscious communicates with consciousness via a sophisticated symbolic language. Dreams, fantasies, sudden insights, and even psychological symptoms function as vital messages from the unconscious. These messages aim to restore balance and promote psychological growth, acting as internal guides. Freud primarily viewed dreams as wish fulfillment, serving to express repressed desires. Jung, in contrast, considered dreams as compensatory mechanisms that offer missing perspectives to the conscious mind. Dreams guide the conscious mind towards greater psychological wholeness, highlighting aspects of the psyche that have been neglected or are out of balance. The unconscious possesses its own intelligence and can often provide solutions to problems that rational, conscious thinking alone may not resolve. Jung revolutionized psychology by conceptualizing the mind as an energy system operating under natural laws, akin to physics. Psychological energy, termed libido by Jung, flows throughout the psyche, much like electricity in a circuit. While Freud understood libido exclusively as sexual energy, Jung conceived libido as a general life force present in all human activities. These activities include creativity, spiritual pursuits, intellectual work, and emotional connections, emphasizing its pervasive influence. The constant movement of psychic energy among different psychological contents creates dynamic patterns in human behavior. Jung identified compensation as a fundamental principle governing psychic energy operation. When conscious attitudes become excessively one-sided or extreme, the unconscious automatically generates opposing tendencies. This process aims to restore psychological balance, preventing an imbalance from becoming detrimental. For example, an overly rational individual who disregards emotional considerations may experience dreams, fantasies, or symptoms that compel them to address their neglected emotional side. This compensatory mechanism prevents any single psychological function from completely dominating, thereby averting dangerous psychological imbalances that could lead to neurosis or psychosis. The flow of psychic energy also forms psychological complexes, which are clusters of emotionally charged ideas or images. These complexes operate somewhat independently within the psyche, carrying their own psychic charge. Complexes can temporarily absorb significant amounts of psychological energy, leading to sudden mood changes, obsessive thoughts, or compulsive behaviors that seem to take over an individual. Jung observed that energy fixated within a complex often indicates a critical psychological issue requiring conscious attention and integration. Understanding energy flow clarifies why certain experiences trigger disproportionate emotional reactions, or why individuals become fixated on particular ideas or relationships, as these are points where complexes have absorbed significant psychic energy. Psychic energy naturally moves in cycles, alternating between phases of progression and regression. Progressive phases involve energy directed towards conscious goals and external adaptation, where the individual focuses on engaging with the outer world. These phases facilitate the accomplishment of worldly tasks and the development of ego identity, helping a person establish their place in society. Regressive phases involve energy withdrawing from external concerns and returning to unconscious contents. This often brings forth childhood memories, primitive fantasies, or archetypal images, leading to introspection and inner exploration. Jung did not view regression as pathological or a sign of illness, but rather as a necessary process that enables the psyche to reconnect with its deeper sources of wisdom and creativity, vital for psychological renewal. The concept of psychological energy also elucidates psychological inflation. Psychological inflation occurs when individuals unconsciously identify with powerful archetypal contents and consequently lose their personal boundaries. Unconscious identification with archetypes like the wise sage or heroic savior can result in grandiose feelings. Individuals may believe they possess superhuman abilities or profound knowledge due to this identification, blurring the lines between their personal ego and a collective, universal image. Inflation stems from archetypal energy being collective rather than personal. It is an impersonal force. When this collective archetypal energy flows through an individual ego without conscious differentiation, it can produce dangerous delusions of grandeur and a loss of touch with personal reality. Jung stressed that acknowledging and respecting the autonomous nature of archetypal energy helps prevent psychological inflation. This recognition also maintains healthy ego boundaries, allowing individuals to experience archetypal influence without being overwhelmed or consumed by it. Jung's theory of psychological types originated from his extensive observation of fundamental differences in how individuals perceive and interact with the world. After extensive clinical work and deep personal reflection, Jung identified two basic attitude types: extroversion and introversion. These orientations determine whether individuals primarily focus their energy inward or outward. The terms extroversion and introversion are now common in everyday language, but are often misunderstood in their original psychological context. Jung clarified that these types are not rigid personality categories, but rather describe the natural flow of psychic energy in individuals. Extroversion involves directing psychological energy toward the external world, including people, objects, and activities. Extroverted individuals are typically energized by social interaction, finding their vitality in external engagement. They seek stimulation from their environment and naturally prioritize external circumstances when making decisions, often considering the practical outcomes. Extroverted types often think aloud and process experiences by discussing them with others, using conversation as a means of understanding. They are comfortable acting quickly without extensive internal reflection, often thriving in fast-paced environments. Extroverted individuals commonly appear confident and socially skilled, engaging easily with others. They may, however, struggle with prolonged solitude and tend to avoid deep introspection, preferring outward engagement. Introversion involves focusing psychological energy inward toward thoughts, feelings, and inner experiences. Introverted individuals are generally energized by solitude, finding replenishment in quiet self-reflection. They prefer to process experiences internally before sharing them, carefully considering their thoughts and feelings. They naturally consider their inner reactions when making decisions, prioritizing their subjective experience. Introverted types typically think before speaking and require time alone to recharge after social interaction, needing to retreat to regain energy. They are comfortable with extended periods of reflection and contemplation, often enjoying solitary pursuits. Introverted individuals often appear thoughtful and self-contained, presenting a reserved demeanor. They may struggle with spontaneous social interaction and tend to avoid large group situations, finding them draining. Jung observed that these attitude types are largely innate and remain relatively stable throughout life, forming a fundamental aspect of one's disposition. While individuals can develop their less preferred attitude through conscious effort, it requires significant energy and commitment. Most people strongly favor one attitude, while the other remains less developed and largely unconscious. This dynamic often leads the unconscious to compensate for conscious one-sidedness. Compensation occurs through dreams, fantasies, or attractions that draw individuals toward their less developed attitude, seeking to restore balance. Understanding these natural preferences clarifies many interpersonal conflicts and misunderstandings. Such conflicts frequently arise when extroverted and introverted types attempt to communicate or collaborate without recognizing their differing energy orientations. Jung also noted that within each attitude type, individuals exhibit distinct preferences for gathering information and making decisions. Some individuals inherently trust direct sensory experience, focusing on concrete facts and practical details. These individuals rely on what they can see, hear, touch, and feel. Others prefer to focus on possibilities, patterns, and abstract concepts, looking beyond the immediate reality. Similarly, some individuals make decisions primarily through logical analysis and objective criteria, seeking impartial solutions. Others prioritize personal values and the impact of decisions on human relationships, emphasizing ethical and relational considerations. These varying approaches to processing information and making decisions create additional layers of psychological type differences. These differences profoundly influence how individuals approach work, relationships, and challenges, shaping their entire engagement with the world. Jung identified four fundamental psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. These functions represent different methods the human mind uses to process information and make decisions, acting as distinct mental faculties. The functions operate like specialized tools within the psyche, each offering a unique perspective on reality. Each function contributes to an individual's overall understanding of the world, providing different lenses through which to interpret experience. Jung observed that all individuals possess all four functions, though not equally developed. However, individuals typically develop one or two functions more fully, becoming their preferred modes of operation, while the others remain relatively unconscious and undifferentiated. This uneven development results in both strengths and blind spots in personality, making individuals highly capable in some areas and less adept in others. This uneven development significantly influences personality, career choices, and relationship dynamics, shaping an individual's life path. The thinking function processes information through logical analysis, objective reasoning, and systematic evaluation of cause and effect relationships. Individuals strongly favoring thinking tend to make decisions by analyzing facts, weighing pros and cons, and applying consistent principles. These decisions are made regardless of personal feelings or social considerations, prioritizing objectivity. Thinking types excel at problem solving, strategic planning, and comprehending complex systems. They may struggle to consider the human impact of their decisions or appreciate the value of emotions in decision-making, sometimes appearing cold. Thinking types often appear detached and impersonal, valuing truth above all. Their objectivity allows them to maintain fairness and consistency even in emotionally charged situations, providing a stable anchor. The feeling function evaluates information based on personal values, human considerations, and the subjective worth of different options. Individuals favoring feeling make decisions by prioritizing what matters most to them personally. They also consider how their choices will affect other people, emphasizing relational harmony. Feeling types excel at understanding human motivations, fostering harmony in relationships, and recognizing underlying values guiding behavior. They may struggle with impersonal analysis or making difficult decisions that could hurt others, sometimes appearing indecisive. Feeling types often appear warm and empathetic, connecting easily with others. Their value-based approach helps them forge meaningful connections and maintain group cohesion, valuing belonging. The sensation function concentrates on immediate sensory experience, concrete facts, and practical realities of the present moment. Individuals favoring sensation tend to trust direct sensory input, such as sight, hearing, and touch, over abstract theories or future possibilities. They excel at noticing details, working with their hands, and addressing practical problems requiring immediate attention. Sensation types may struggle with long-term planning or understanding theoretical concepts, preferring the tangible. Sensation types often appear grounded and realistic, firmly rooted in the present. Their practical focus enables them to excel in fields demanding attention to concrete details and immediate results, like engineering or crafts. The intuition function perceives patterns, possibilities, and hidden meanings beyond immediate sensory experience. Individuals favoring intuition tend to focus on future potential, underlying connections, and innovative possibilities rather than present realities. They excel at perceiving the big picture, generating creative solutions, and understanding complex theoretical relationships. Intuitive types may struggle with practical details or consistently performing routine tasks, finding them mundane. Intuitive types often appear visionary and imaginative, always looking for what could be. Their ability to perceive hidden possibilities assists them in fields requiring innovation and strategic thinking, such as entrepreneurship or science. Jung discovered that these four functions operate in pairs of opposites. Thinking and feeling form one pair, and sensation and intuition form another, creating a dynamic tension within the psyche. Jung identified the transcendent function as a crucial mechanism for psychological development. The transcendent function integrates opposing psychological contents and generates new conscious attitudes, moving beyond the initial conflict. It emerges when conscious and unconscious elements unite to produce creative solutions that surpass the limitations of either individual perspective, leading to a new level of understanding. Understanding and developing this integrative capacity is essential for psychological growth and for resolving inner conflicts, allowing an individual to become more whole. As Jung continued his groundbreaking work, his discovery of psychological complexes emerged as a crucial contribution to understanding mental functioning. Through careful word association experiments, Jung observed that certain words consistently elicited delayed responses, marked emotional reactions, and even temporary memory lapses. These reactions were not random. They indicated the presence of autonomous psychological structures operating largely outside conscious control. These psychological complexes, Jung determined, function almost as independent personalities within the psyche, each possessing its own distinct emotions, specific memories, and predictable behavioral patterns. They could temporarily take control of consciousness, subtly influencing or overtly dominating an individual's thoughts and actions. Jung concluded that every individual possesses multiple complexes, and understanding their nature is absolutely critical for achieving psychological health and fostering personal development. A complex forms when emotionally charged ideas, vivid memories, and associated experiences cluster around a central, often archetypal, core. For instance, a mother complex may include deeply personal memories of one's actual mother, cultural images of motherhood drawn from society, and the powerful archetypal pattern of the Great Mother from the collective unconscious. When such a complex is activated, It can cause an individual to react to certain people or situations as if they were their mother, irrespective of the actual circumstances. This complex operates autonomously, often possessing its own agenda and potentially overriding rational thinking when triggered by specific situations or relationships. Jung noted that complexes frequently develop during childhood, a period when powerful emotional experiences combine with archetypal patterns to form lasting psychological structures. A child experiencing neglect or abandonment, for example, might develop a complex centered on themes of rejection and unworthiness. This deep-seated pattern can continue to influence all subsequent relationships throughout adult life. These early complexes act as powerful psychological magnets, consistently attracting similar experiences and interpreting ambiguous situations according to their established patterns. Understanding one's personal complexes helps to explain why individuals experience disproportionate emotional reactions to certain relationships or situations, and it also clarifies why they repeatedly encounter similar problematic circumstances across their lives. Complexes manifest through various psychological phenomena, notably projection, where individuals unconsciously attribute their own complex contents to other people. An individual with an unresolved father complex, for example, might automatically perceive authority figures as either idealized saviors or threatening tyrants, depending entirely on the complex's specific nature and emotional charge. Complexes also appear through psychological inflation, a state where individuals identify so strongly with archetypal contents that they lose personal boundaries and limitations. A person experiencing inflation from a savior complex, for instance, might genuinely believe they possess special powers to rescue others, leading to grandiose or messianic behavior that often proves detrimental. Working with complexes necessitates developing what Jung termed conscious realization, which is the ability to recognize precisely when a complex is activated. It also involves distinguishing clearly between complex-driven reactions and responses that are appropriate to actual circumstances. Jung developed various therapeutic techniques, such as active imagination and dream analysis, specifically to facilitate a dialogue with these complexes. These techniques aim to help individuals integrate complex contents more consciously into their overall personality. The objective is not to eliminate complexes, which Jung considered both impossible and undesirable, but rather to cultivate a healthy, conscious relationship with these autonomous psychological structures. When complexes are acknowledged and integrated, they can transform from disruptive forces into powerful sources of creativity, passion, and vital psychological energy. Jung regarded individuation as the central task of human psychological development and the ultimate goal of his analytical psychology. Individuation is a gradual process involving the realization and conscious integration of various psychic components into a unified whole, culminating in the emergence of the true self. Simple ego development, in contrast, primarily focuses on adapting to external demands and societal expectations. Individuation, however, requires confronting and integrating unconscious contents that may challenge or even contradict conscious beliefs and established attitudes. Jung viewed individuation as a natural, lifelong process, but one that absolutely requires conscious participation and considerable courage to face difficult psychological truths. The individuation process typically commences in midlife, a period when individuals often begin to question the values and goals that previously provided meaning and direction. Jung observed many individuals experiencing a significant psychological crisis during their 30s or 40s, when external achievements might fail to provide lasting satisfaction. Deeper questions about life's purpose often begin to emerge at this time, and this crisis frequently manifests as depression, anxiety, relationship problems, or a general sense of emptiness despite outward success. Jung interpreted these symptoms as vital signals from the unconscious, indicating that the time had come for a deeper journey towards psychological wholeness and authentic self-expression. Early stages of individuation involve withdrawing psychological projections and taking responsibility for disowned aspects of one's personality. Individuals must recognize and reclaim parts of themselves that they have unconsciously projected onto others, institutions, or abstract ideals. This includes directly confronting the shadow, which comprises personality aspects that contradict the conscious self-image and have consequently been relegated to the unconscious. The individuation process also necessitates integrating contra-sexual personality aspects, which Jung named the anima in men and the animus in women. These represent undeveloped psychological functions and attitudes that precisely complement conscious personality, often holding the key to greater inner balance. As individuation progresses, individuals experience a profound shift in their relationship with the ego and its established goals. The ego, previously the undisputed center of personality, gradually learns to serve the deeper self, which emerges from the integration of conscious and unconscious contents. This transition often involves periods of profound uncertainty and disorientation, as old identity structures dissolve and new ones have not yet fully formed. Jung likened this challenging phase to the alchemical process of dissolution and renewal, suggesting that the old personality must symbolically die before a more authentic self can emerge. The ultimate goal of individuation is not perfection but wholeness, which includes accepting human limitations, inherent contradictions, and the inevitable presence of suffering. Individuated individuals develop what Jung called a religious attitude toward life, signifying a profound sense of connection to something greater than mere personal ego concerns. They become capable of holding paradox and tension without rushing to eliminate discomfort, developing a deep appreciation for the inherent mystery and complexity of human existence. Jung consistently emphasized that individuation is an ongoing process of growth and self-discovery, never fully complete during a person's lifetime. The self-archetype represents Jung's most profound discovery regarding the deepest structure of human personality and the ultimate goal of psychological development. Unlike the ego, which is the center of conscious awareness, the self encompasses the totality of conscious and unconscious psychic contents, functioning as the organizing principle of the entire personality. Jung described the self as both the goal of individuation and the inherent guiding force behind psychological development itself. This archetype emerges gradually throughout life as individuals integrate various personality aspects, leading to a more complete understanding of their true nature and purpose. The self-archetype manifests in consciousness through powerful symbols that convey wholeness, completion, and transcendence. These symbols include geometric forms such as circles, squares, and mandalas, as well as images of divine figures, wise old men or women, and mythological beings representing ultimate authority and wisdom. Jung observed that individuals undergoing psychological transformation frequently spontaneously draw circular patterns or feel drawn to religious and spiritual imagery depicting unity and transcendence. These self-symbols appear in dreams, active imagination, and artistic expressions, as the psyche uses them to symbolically represent its deepest organizing principle. The relationship between ego and self undergoes a fundamental transformation during the process of individuation. In the first half of life, the ego typically functions as the personality's center, making decisions based on personal desires, social expectations, and rational calculations. As individuation progresses, however, the ego gradually learns to recognize and serve the deeper wisdom of the self, which possesses a far broader perspective on life's meaning and purpose. This crucial shift requires the ego to relinquish its illusion of total control, involving the development of a religious attitude that acknowledges forces greater than conscious will. Jung noted that the self often communicates with consciousness through synchronistic experiences, which are meaningful coincidences, suggesting an underlying order and intelligence beyond personal control. Individuals might observe that important life events unfold in a pattern only apparent in retrospect, as if guided by an invisible hand. The self also manifests through the transcendent function, which actively creates new conscious attitudes and bridges opposing psychological contents, generating creative solutions to internal conflicts. These experiences provide compelling evidence that something beyond the ego organizes psychological development, suggesting guidance towards an individual's unique path of self-realization. The emergence of the self as a living reality in consciousness signifies the culmination of individuation and represents the development of genuine psychological maturity. Individuals with a conscious relationship with the self typically exhibit a centered presence and an inner authority that does not depend on external validation or achievement. They become capable of making difficult decisions based on inner conviction rather than social pressure, and they develop the capacity to tolerate paradox and uncertainty without losing psychological equilibrium. Jung emphasized that realizing the self does not eliminate human problems or challenges, but rather provides a stable foundation for navigating life's complexities with profound wisdom, deep compassion, and unwavering resilience. The shadow is an archetype representing aspects of personality that individuals find unacceptable and consequently relegate to the unconscious, forming a hidden counterpart to the conscious persona. The shadow includes negative qualities such as aggression, selfishness, and crude impulses, but it also contains positive potentials that may contradict social expectations or threaten the conscious self-image. Jung asserted that everyone possesses a shadow, and psychological health requires acknowledging and integrating these disowned aspects rather than denying their very existence. Shadow formation begins in early childhood due to social conditioning, which teaches individuals which personality aspects are acceptable and which must be hidden or suppressed. Parents, teachers, and peer groups convey explicit and implicit messages about appropriate behavior, leading children to emphasize socially rewarded qualities and suppress unacceptable impulses into the unconscious. This process is necessary for social functioning. However, it creates an internal split that becomes problematic if the shadow remains completely unconscious and unintegrated. Cultural and family values significantly influence which specific qualities become part of the shadow, which explains the variation in shadow contents among individuals and social groups. The shadow typically reveals itself through psychological projection, where individuals unconsciously attribute their own disowned qualities to other people. Someone who has repressed aggressive impulses might become hypersensitive to aggression in others, reacting with disproportionate moral outrage to relatively minor displays of assertiveness. Shadow projection also accounts for many forms of prejudice and social conflict, as groups project their collective shadow onto other ethnicities, religions, or political movements. Jung observed that qualities most strongly condemned in others often represent aspects of one's own shadow, aspects that individuals refuse to acknowledge or integrate consciously. Dreams frequently offer initial glimpses of shadow contents, appearing as disturbing images of dark figures, criminals, animals, or same-sex characters embodying reprehensible qualities. Shadow figures in dreams often pursue, attack, or threaten the dream ego, representing the unconscious pressure to acknowledge and integrate disowned personality aspects. Jung encouraged individuals to dialogue with these dream figures rather than merely fighting or fleeing them, believing that these figures contain valuable energy and capabilities that can enhance conscious personality when properly integrated. Active imagination techniques can further facilitate ongoing communication with shadow figures, transforming them from threatening adversaries into powerful allies. Integrating the shadow demands significant courage and honesty, requiring individuals to acknowledge aspects of oneself that contradict cherished self-concepts and moral ideals. Jung discovered that shadow integration strengthens conscious personality rather than corrupting it, providing access to previously unavailable energy, creativity, and authentic self-expression. Individuals who have integrated significant shadow contents become more spontaneous, passionate, and psychologically robust. They also develop genuine humility and profound compassion for human weakness. Jung warned that attempting to eliminate the shadow leads to psychological inflation and dangerous unconscious possession, whereas conscious integration allows individuals to channel shadow energy constructively without being controlled by it. Jung discovered that every individual possesses an unconscious contra-sexual aspect, which compensates for conscious gender identity and bridges conscious and unconscious realms. In men, this unconscious feminine aspect is called the anima. In women, the unconscious masculine aspect is termed the animus. These archetypal figures are more than simple gender stereotypes. They embody undeveloped psychological functions, emotional capacities, and spiritual possibilities that profoundly complement the conscious personality. Understanding and integrating the contra-sexual archetype is essential for psychological completeness and crucial for developing mature relationships with oneself and others. The anima in men typically manifests as emotional, intuitive, and relational qualities, which are often underdeveloped due to masculine socialization, emphasizing logic, achievement, and emotional control. The anima often appears in dreams as a mysterious woman, a captivating seductress, or a wise spiritual guide, leading the man toward greater emotional depth and connection with his inner life. When the anima remains unconscious, men may project her onto actual women, seeking emotional fulfillment and spiritual meaning in romantic relationships that they cannot provide for themselves. This projection creates unrealistic expectations and inevitable relationship difficulties, as no real woman can bear the full weight of a man's unlived psychological potential. The animus in women represents thinking, assertiveness, and spiritual authority, qualities that may have been suppressed by feminine socialization, which often emphasizes emotional receptivity and relational harmony. The animus often appears in dreams as a powerful man, a revered teacher, or a formidable warrior, embodying conviction, intellectual strength, and the capacity for independent action. When the animus remains unconscious, women may experience possession by rigid opinions, aggressive argumentativeness, or an inability to think clearly about emotional situations. Alternatively, women may project the animus onto men, seeking intellectual stimulation and spiritual authority in relationships that they have not developed within themselves. Jung observed that contra-sexual projection often leads to a psychological phenomenon called participation mystique, where individuals unconsciously merge with others and lose their sense of individual boundaries. When someone projects their anima or animus onto another person, they may experience intense attraction, idealization, or emotional dependency, an attraction that has little to do with the actual qualities of the other person. These projections frequently cause dramatic relationship conflicts when the idealized other fails to meet unrealistic expectations, or when the projector withdraws their projections and perceives the other person more realistically. Understanding these projection dynamics helps explain why romantic relationships often begin with intense passion, only to gradually evolve into more realistic but potentially disappointing connections. The integration of anima and animus requires developing a conscious relationship with these inner figures, primarily achieved through dream work, active imagination, and the gradual withdrawal of projections from external relationships. As men integrate their anima, they become more emotionally available, creative, and spiritually sensitive without losing their masculine strength and direction. As women integrate their animus, they develop intellectual confidence, assertive capabilities, and spiritual authority while maintaining their feminine receptivity and relational wisdom. Jung emphasized that this integration does not eliminate gender differences, but instead creates more complete individuals who can access both masculine and feminine psychological capacities as appropriate to any situation. The persona represents the mask or public face individuals present to the world, allowing effective functioning in social and professional contexts. Jung derived the term persona from masks worn by actors in ancient Greek theater, emphasizing that the persona serves a legitimate dramatic function, not mere deception. Every individual develops multiple personas suited to different social roles, such as parent, employee, friend, or community member. The ability to adapt one's presentation to various contexts is an important social skill. Problems arise, however, when individuals become overly identified with their personas, or when the gap between public presentation and private reality becomes too extreme. Persona development starts in childhood, as children learn to modify their natural behavior to meet family and social expectations. Children quickly learn that certain personality aspects receive positive attention, while others provoke criticism or rejection, leading them to emphasize socially rewarded qualities and hide unacceptable impulses. Educational and professional environments further shape persona development, rewarding specific skills, attitudes, and behavioral patterns while actively discouraging others. Over time, individuals may become so skilled at presenting an idealized self that they lose touch with authentic feelings, genuine desires, and spontaneous reactions. Jung observed that successful persona development requires a delicate balance between social adaptation and authentic self-expression. A well-functioning persona enables individuals to meet legitimate social obligations and professional requirements without completely sacrificing individuality and personal truth. When the persona becomes too rigid or elaborate, it can inadvertently create a psychological prison, preventing genuine intimacy and self-knowledge. Individuals may experience exhaustion from constantly maintaining their public image, and they may feel increasingly disconnected from their true feelings and desires by focusing primarily on external validation and approval. The midlife crisis often involves a collapse or questioning of previously successful personas, as individuals begin to realize that public achievements have not provided the expected deep satisfaction. Successful professionals might suddenly feel empty despite external recognition, and devoted parents might experience an identity crisis when their children become independent. These persona crises, though painful, serve as powerful invitations to explore more authentic ways of being and to develop personality aspects neglected in favor of social success. Jung viewed such crises as valuable opportunities for psychological growth rather than mere problems or symptoms of failure. Healthy persona development involves maintaining conscious awareness of the distinction between social roles and core identity. Individuals need to be able to adopt and discard various personas as appropriate, without becoming completely identified with any single role or social identity. This requires developing ego strength, which is the capacity to maintain personal continuity and authenticity despite changing external demands and social expectations. When the persona serves the authentic self, rather than replacing it, individuals can engage effectively with the social world while remaining connected to their deeper sources of truth. Parental archetypes represent fundamental patterns of nurturing and authority that shape human development from birth through adulthood. Jung discovered that every individual carries unconscious great mother and great father images, which transcend personal experiences with actual parents. These archetypal patterns profoundly influence how individuals understand caregiving, protection, discipline, and guidance. They affect parent-child relationships, connections with teachers, mentors, employers, and even religious figures. Understanding parental archetypes helps explain why certain authority figures trigger powerful emotional reactions and clarifies why parenting challenges often activate deep unconscious conflicts. The Great Mother archetype encompasses both positive and negative aspects of the maternal principle. In her positive manifestation, she represents unconditional love, nurturing protection, fertile creativity, and wisdom drawn from natural cycles and instinctive knowledge. The positive mother provides emotional security, encourages growth and exploration, and offers profound comfort during difficulties. However, the Great Mother also possesses a darker side, which can be possessive, smothering, and even destructive. This negative aspect represents the tendency to overprotect children and hinder their development towards independence. The Great Father archetype embodies both protective and disciplinary aspects of paternal authority. In his positive form, he represents strength, guidance, moral principles, and the capacity to provide structure and direction, helping children develop confidence and competence in the outer world. The positive father encourages achievement, teaches practical skills, and models effective engagement with social institutions and cultural expectations. Conversely, the negative father archetype manifests as tyrannical control, harsh criticism, and rigid authoritarianism, crushing individual creativity and enforcing conformity through fear and punishment, rather than love and understanding. Jung observed that individuals often develop parental complexes when personal parents fail to adequately embody the positive archetypal aspects, or when parents become excessively identified with the negative manifestations. A mother complex might lead someone to remain psychologically dependent, unable to take responsibility for their own life, constantly seeking maternal figures for care and protection. A father complex might manifest as rebellious opposition to all authority, or alternatively, as submissive compliance that prevents the development of personal strength and independent judgment. These complexes continue to influence adult relationships, career choices, and life decisions until recognized and consciously addressed through psychological work. The integration of parental archetypes requires developing the inner parent, which is the capacity to provide oneself with the nurturing and guidance potentially lacking in childhood. This involves accessing the positive qualities of both maternal and paternal archetypes, regardless of biological gender, creating an internal source of support and wisdom independent of external relationships. As individuals develop their inner parental capacity, they can offer authentic care and guidance to others without becoming possessive or controlling. They can also receive help and mentorship without losing their sense of personal autonomy. This psychological maturation enables individuals to break destructive family patterns and facilitates the creation of healthier relationships with their own children and lives. After exploring the core structures of the psyche, we delve deeper into the archetypes that animate human experience and the developmental journey throughout a lifetime. Carl Jung observed that the hero archetype represents a profound and universal pattern, for understanding personal transformation and psychological maturity. He noted a remarkable consistency in the structure of hero myths across diverse cultures worldwide, a similarity too pronounced to be solely attributed to cultural transmission. This global commonality suggested that hero myths emerge from archetypal patterns embedded within the collective unconscious, functioning as an innate psychological template. The hero's journey typically involves a departure from the familiar world, a confrontation with dangerous challenges, receiving aid from wise mentors, and a return transformed. Critically, the hero returns with new knowledge or powers that subsequently benefit their community. This archetypal pattern thus functions as a psychological map for the individuation process, helping individuals comprehend their own struggles for growth and self-realization. The psychological hero journey commences with what Jung termed the call to adventure. This call is a significant disruption of ordinary life that compels individuals to face new challenges, necessitating a departure from comfortable but potentially limiting circumstances. The call might arise from external events such as job loss, a relationship crisis, or a serious illness. Alternatively, it could originate from an internal restlessness and dissatisfaction with existing life patterns, a subtle but persistent yearning for something more. Initially, most individuals resist this call, attempting to maintain familiar routines and established identities. However, the inner pressure for growth eventually becomes too strong to ignore. Answering this call requires immense courage, as it means abandoning known securities and venturing into unknown territory where old coping strategies may no longer be effective. It is a moment of profound psychological choice, demanding faith in the unseen path ahead. Alongside the powerful hero, we find the child archetype, embodying the innocent, spontaneous, and creative aspects of human nature. These vital qualities often become suppressed under the weight of adult responsibilities and social conditioning. Jung identified several manifestations of the child archetype, including the divine child, which symbolizes new potential and spiritual rebirth, and the wounded child, representing the pain and limitations arising from early life experiences. The child archetype possesses remarkable resilience and a seemingly boundless capacity for wonder, play, and magical thinking. Adults frequently lose these qualities in their relentless pursuit of rational control and social success, often perceiving them as liabilities rather than strengths. Reconnecting with this healthy child energy is essential for fostering creativity, experiencing genuine joy, and maintaining hope during difficult life transitions. It provides a wellspring of renewal when adult life becomes burdensome. The hero's journey involves a crucial, dynamic relationship between the heroic ego and the child archetype. The hero must protect and nurture their inner child, ensuring its vitality, while simultaneously developing the strength and skills necessary for adult challenges. Many psychological problems occur when individuals are overly identified with the child archetype, avoiding adult responsibilities and remaining in a state of perpetual immaturity. Conversely, problems also arise when individuals completely abandon their childlike qualities, adopting rigid adult personas devoid of spontaneity and joy. Successful completion of the hero's journey demands integrating both childlike wonder and adult competence. This integration creates a mature personality that retains access to creativity and spontaneity, while also possessing the strength to handle life's inevitable difficulties. This delicate balance allows individuals to approach challenges with both wisdom and freshness, helping to avoid the cynicism often associated with purely adult perspectives. It is a state of being fully grown yet eternally youthful in spirit. Jung emphasized that the hero's journey is a recurring pattern throughout life, not a one-time event or singular quest. Each major life transition, from adolescence to marriage, parenthood, career changes, and aging, involves abandoning an old identity and developing new capacities for changing circumstances. Understanding the archetypal nature of these transitions helps individuals recognize their struggles as universal human experiences, preventing them from viewing such periods as personal failures or unique problems. The framework of the hero's journey offers profound hope during difficult periods, suggesting that current challenges serve a larger, purposeful role in personal development. It implies that transformation and renewal are always possible, regardless of external circumstances. This perspective encourages individuals to endure, knowing that the struggles of today are preparing them for a stronger, more integrated self tomorrow. It reframes suffering as a necessary part of growth. Another ancient and psychologically significant figure in human consciousness is the trickster archetype. It embodies creative chaos, disrupting established order and fostering new possibilities. The trickster appears in virtually every culture, exemplified by figures such as the Norse god Loki, the Native American coyote, and the African spider god Anansi. This archetype challenges conventional wisdom and social rules through humor, cunning, and boundary-crossing behavior, often exposing the absurdities of rigid systems. Psychologically, the trickster represents the aspect of human nature that questions authority and exposes hypocrisy, refusing to be confined by rigid social expectations or moral categories. This archetype plays an essential role in maintaining psychological flexibility, preventing individuals and societies from becoming overly self-righteous or dogmatic. It reminds us that truth is often found at the margins, and that order must sometimes be broken for new growth to emerge. Complementing the trickster is the magician archetype, embodying the human capacity for transformation and a deep knowledge of hidden laws. It represents the ability to bridge different levels of reality, understanding the specialized knowledge of how things truly work. This profound insight allows for the manipulation of forces to create desired changes in both inner and outer circumstances. The magician is the master of intention and manifestation, operating beyond surface appearances. In its positive manifestation, the magician archetype represents wisdom, healing power, and the capacity to help others transform their lives through insight and skill. However, the magician can also become corrupted, devolving into a manipulative sorcerer who uses knowledge for selfish purposes, or an inflated guru claiming powers that belong to the divine rather than the human ego. The conscious integration of this archetype demands immense ethical responsibility and humility. Beyond these universal figures, cultural archetypes emerge from the collective experiences of specific societies. They represent shared values, fears, and aspirations that define a group identity. American culture, for instance, has distinctive archetypal patterns built around figures like the self-made man, the rebel, and the pioneer. Other cultures emphasize different archetypal configurations based on unique historical experiences, environmental challenges, and traditional beliefs. These cultural archetypes powerfully influence individual psychology, shaping personal goals, relationship expectations, and beliefs about what constitutes a meaningful and successful life. Understanding cultural archetypes helps explain difficulties in mutual understanding between people from different backgrounds, even when they share similar personality types. They operate as unconscious lenses through which reality is perceived, often leading to misunderstandings when not consciously acknowledged. Jung noted that cultural archetypes can become problematic if they are too rigidly defined, or if they exclude important aspects of human experience. For example, cultures that overemphasize masculine archetypes, such as the warrior or the king, may struggle to integrate feminine values like cooperation, emotional sensitivity, and nurturing. Similarly, Cultures idealizing maternal figures may have difficulty accepting aggressive or competitive impulses in their members, leading to their repression. The process of cultural evolution often involves the gradual transformation of archetypal patterns as societies encounter new challenges and develop new capacities. Individual psychological development, in turn, often requires questioning inherited cultural archetypes, striving to develop a more personal and authentic relationship with universal archetypal energies. It is a journey of discerning which cultural values serve one's authentic self and which inhibit it. The integration of trickster and magician energies is especially vital for creative individuals and for those in fields demanding innovation and transformation. The trickster provides the willingness to experiment, make mistakes, and courageously challenge conventional approaches, preventing stagnation. The magician, on the other hand, offers the discipline and knowledge necessary to channel creative chaos into constructive, tangible outcomes, bringing wild ideas into reality. Both archetypes can be dangerous when operating unconsciously, leading to destructive rebellion or manipulative power games instead of genuine transformation and growth. A conscious relationship with these archetypal energies enables individuals to serve as positive change agents, contributing to society without succumbing to the inflation and shadow possession that often accompanies prominent figures. It is about channeling their raw power with intention and wisdom. Carl Jung revolutionized psychology by recognizing human development as a lifelong process, identifying distinct psychological tasks and challenges corresponding to different life stages. Each stage requires specific developmental achievements and offers unique growth opportunities, moving beyond earlier, more limited views of development. Unlike purely biological or social models, Jung's approach emphasized the profound psychological and spiritual dimensions of life transitions. He recognized that external changes often mask deeper internal transformations, which are the true drivers of psychological evolution. Understanding these life stages aids individuals in navigating major transitions with greater awareness and purpose, helping them recognize that apparent crises often signal important developmental opportunities rather than mere setbacks. Life's curveballs become catalysts for deeper self-discovery. The first half of life, roughly until age 40, primarily focuses on ego development and adaptation to external reality. During this period, individuals establish their identity, develop capabilities, build relationships, and find their place in the social and professional world. Psychological tasks include separating from parents, developing competence and confidence, establishing intimate relationships, and contributing to society through work and family responsibilities. Success in this phase typically involves a strong ego structure, mastering practical skills, and achieving external recognition and security. The midlife transition, occurring approximately between the late 30s and early 50s, is a crucial turning point. Values and goals that previously provided meaning may suddenly feel insufficient or hollow, prompting a deep existential reevaluation. Jung observed significant psychological disruption during this period, as individuals questioned whether their achievements truly satisfied deeper longings for purpose and fulfillment. This transition involves confronting mortality, recognizing unrealized potentials, and shifting focus from external to internal development. The midlife crisis, though often painful, serves an essential function in redirecting psychological energy toward individuation and spiritual growth, forcing a confrontation with neglected aspects of the self. The second half of life requires distinctly different psychological orientations and developmental tasks. The focus shifts from ego expansion and external achievement to serving something greater than personal desires. This period involves developing wisdom, finding meaning in limitation and loss, and consciously preparing for death. Jung emphasized the naturally religious character of the second half of life, where individuals seek connection with transcendent values and experiences, providing perspective on temporary earthly concerns. Each major life stage transition involves a sacrifice of the previous attitude. Individuals must willingly release identities, goals, and strategies that previously served them well, but are now obstacles to further growth. Young adults, for instance, sacrifice childhood dependency and fantasy for adult competence and responsibility. Midlife individuals, in turn, sacrifice the illusion of unlimited possibility and eternal youth for mature wisdom and acceptance of their finite nature. These sacrifices are rarely made willingly, which explains the resistance, depression, and apparent regression often observed during transitions. Understanding these psychological deaths and rebirths helps individuals approach transitions with patience and trust in the natural development process, rather than resisting inevitable changes. It underscores that what feels like an ending is often merely a prelude to a new beginning, a necessary shedding of the old to make way for the new. The midlife crisis stands as a significant discovery by Jung regarding adult psychological development and the evolution of consciousness. He observed that between the late 30s and early 50s, many individuals profoundly question life's meaning and direction. This crisis often manifests as depression, anxiety, relationship problems, career dissatisfaction, or a pervasive sense of lost vitality, all despite often achieving significant external success and recognition. Jung viewed these symptoms not as pathological, but as unconscious signals for a necessary reorientation of psychological priorities. The midlife crisis typically emerges when individuals realize that external achievements have not provided deep, lasting satisfaction. Successful professionals may feel an unexpected emptiness despite recognition and financial security, while parents may experience identity confusion when children become independent. Spouses may question if their relationships truly reflect authentic needs and desires. These realizations often trigger intense self-examination and questioning, which can feel like a complete breakdown of stable life structures. Jung understood this breakdown as a necessary prelude to psychological reconstruction on more authentic foundations. Midlife transformation involves a fundamental shift in the ego-unconscious relationship. In the first half of life, the ego largely dominates, making decisions based on ambition, social expectations, and rational planning. At midlife, however, the unconscious asserts its agenda more forcefully, often through dreams, fantasies, and unexplained symptoms. These unconscious manifestations may strongly contradict conscious plans and values, creating intense internal conflict between the established ego identity and emerging unconscious contents. These contents demand recognition and integration into the conscious personality, pushing for a more holistic self. Jung identified common themes in midlife psychological transformation. Individuals begin to question the persona they developed for professional and social success, recognizing a potential disconnection between their public image and their authentic feelings. A renewed interest often arises in neglected personality aspects, like creative abilities, spiritual longings, or emotional sensitivities previously set aside. Shadow aspects of the personality, those impulses and qualities previously denied or repressed, may also emerge more forcefully, demanding conscious confrontation. Successful midlife navigation requires developing what Jung called religious attitude. This does not necessarily imply adherence to traditional religious practice, but rather signifies a willingness to serve something greater than personal ego desires. It means recognizing life's deeper purposes and meanings beyond individual achievement and self-gratification. Individuals must learn to listen to unconscious wisdom while maintaining ego strength for daily life responsibilities. This integration process can take several years, often involving significant changes in relationships, career, and lifestyle, as external circumstances are realigned with inner self-expression. Jung's integration of opposites is a profound insight into psychological health and spiritual development. Human personality naturally contains contradictory tendencies, conflicting desires, and opposing perspectives, all of which create internal tension and can lead to apparent psychological problems. Psychological growth, therefore, requires holding these opposites in conscious tension until a new synthesis emerges, one that transcends the limitations of either extreme position. This process, which Jung termed the transcendent function, creates new conscious attitudes and capabilities that would be impossible to achieve through rational analysis or willful decision-making alone. The most fundamental opposition in human psychology is between conscious and unconscious contents. Consciousness tends towards order, control, and rational understanding, striving for clarity. The unconscious, conversely, contains chaotic, instinctive, and often irrational elements that frequently contradict conscious intentions. Many psychological problems arise when individuals attempt complete conscious control, denying unconscious needs and impulses. Integration requires remaining conscious while simultaneously being open to unconscious influences, creating a dynamic dialogue between the rational and irrational aspects of personality. Neither is allowed to dominate completely. Instead, they learn to coexist and inform each other. Other important psychological opposites include thinking versus feeling, sensation versus intuition, extroversion versus introversion, and masculine versus feminine qualities. Most individuals naturally favor one side of these opposites, relegating the other to the unconscious, which creates both strengths and significant blind spots in their personality development. Psychological maturity involves gradually developing these less preferred functions and attitudes, without abandoning the naturally dominant ones, thereby creating a more complete and flexible personality. This integration process often necessitates confronting fear and resistance, as individuals attempt to develop capabilities that may feel foreign or even threatening to their established self-image. Jung emphasized that integration does not eliminate psychological tensions or achieve a perfect, static balance. Instead, it develops the capacity to remain centered while experiencing conflicting psychological forces. This creates a creative tension that generates new insights, solutions, and possibilities for growth that would otherwise remain inaccessible. Individuals with a significant integration of opposites display psychological resilience and wisdom, allowing them to navigate complex situations without being overwhelmed, rigid, or polarized. The integration of opposites also has far-reaching implications for relationships and social conflicts. Many interpersonal problems result from projecting internal contradictions onto others, creating external conflicts that mirror unresolved internal tensions. When people consciously hold their own opposites, they are less likely to engage in destructive projection, becoming more capable of understanding and appreciating differences in others. This psychological development fosters empathy, tolerance, and constructive dialogue across otherwise divisive differences, leading to more harmonious social interactions. Jung's dream analysis radically diverged from Freudian methods, establishing dreams as crucial sources of psychological insight and guidance rather than mere epiphenomena. While Freud viewed dreams primarily as disguised wish fulfillments, revealing repressed sexual desires, Jung discovered that dreams serve a compensatory function, balancing and complementing conscious attitudes. He treated dreams as direct communications from the unconscious in their own symbolic language, not as coded messages for rational translation, implying that dreams speak in a language unique to the psyche. This approach requires understanding dream symbolism on its own terms, avoiding reduction of dream images to predetermined meanings or rigid theoretical interpretations. To explore dream symbols, Jung developed a technique called amplification. This method connects symbols to cultural, mythological, and archetypal parallels, rather than solely relying on personal associations. For example, a dream snake would be considered not only for the dreamer's personal experiences with snakes, but also for its universal symbolic meanings across mythology, religion, and folklore. This approach recognizes that dream symbols carry both personal and collective meanings, connecting individual psychological development to larger patterns of human experience and wisdom. Amplification helps reveal deeper archetypal dimensions of dreams while maintaining their personal relevance and emotional impact. The compensatory function of dreams means they often present perspectives that contradict or balance conscious attitudes. An overly rational person, for instance, might dream of being overwhelmed by floods or storms, symbolizing suppressed emotions. Someone avoiding responsibility might dream of leadership positions, indicating an unconscious desire for greater agency. Dreams frequently feature the shadow archetype appearing as criminals, dark figures, or same-sex characters embodying disowned qualities, and Jung encouraged dreamers to consider what these challenging images might teach them about neglected personality aspects. Jung observed that dreams often occur in series, developing themes and images over time, creating ongoing conversations between conscious and unconscious aspects of the psyche. Keeping a dream journal and tracking recurring symbols, characters, and situations can reveal larger patterns connected to the dreamer's psychological development and current life circumstances. Some dreams compensate for immediate life situations, while others may anticipate future developments, offering guidance for important decisions and life transitions. Significant dreams frequently contain powerful archetypal imagery, connecting personal psychological development to universal human experiences and spiritual themes. Jung emphasized active participation from the dreamer in dream interpretation, preferring this over passive acceptance of expert analysis. The dreamer must actively engage with dream images through active imagination, creative expression, and honest self-reflection to discover personal meaning and significance. Dreams often resist quick intellectual understanding, requiring time, patience, and multiple approaches for insights to emerge. The ultimate goal of dream work is not final interpretations, but establishing an ongoing, living relationship with the unconscious, enriching conscious understanding and supporting psychological life. Active imagination is perhaps Jung's most innovative therapeutic technique, and a major contribution to practical methods for exploring and integrating unconscious contents. This process involves deliberately engaging with unconscious material through imagination, while maintaining conscious awareness to observe and interact with what emerges. Unlike passive fantasy, active imagination demands focused attention and genuine dialogue with autonomous psychological contents, which often appear to have their own intentions and perspectives, seemingly independent of the conscious will. Jung developed this technique during his personal psychological crisis after his break with Freud, using active imagination to explore disturbing unconscious material that later became his famous Red Book. Active imagination begins by entering a relaxed but alert state of consciousness, allowing images, figures, or scenarios to spontaneously emerge from the unconscious. Practitioners observe what appears without directing or controlling the content, instead engaging with it as if encountering real autonomous beings or situations. This might involve conversations with dream figures, exploring imaginary landscapes, or allowing dramatic scenarios to unfold, all while maintaining conscious participation and ethical responsibility for actions within the imagination. The core principle is treating imaginary contents as psychologically real and meaningful, rather than dismissing them as mere fantasy or wishful thinking. Jung discovered that active imagination provides direct access to archetypal material, allowing individuals to work with psychological complexes safely and powerfully. Troubling shadow figures from dreams, for example, can be encountered and dialogued with in active imagination, often revealing their positive intentions and transforming them from adversaries to allies. Anima and animus figures, representing the contra-sexual soul images, can be met and questioned about their needs and wisdom, aiding in consciously integrating these important psychological contents. Active imagination offers a method for exploring personal complexes, helping individuals understand their origins, needs, and potential for transformation without being overwhelmed by emotional intensity. The practice requires careful attention to ethical considerations and psychological boundaries, preventing inflation or possession by autonomous unconscious contents. Jung emphasized that practitioners must maintain ego integrity and moral responsibility, even while engaging with powerful archetypal energies and primitive psychological material, refusing to act out destructive impulses that may emerge in imagination. It also involves maintaining clear distinctions between imaginary and external reality, ensuring that active imagination enhances, not replaces, engagement with the outer world. It provides insights and energy that improve real-life relationships and responsibilities, rather than serving as an escape from them. Jung found that active imagination often yields surprisingly creative and therapeutic results that cannot be achieved through purely rational approaches to psychological problems. Complex psychological conflicts may resolve spontaneously when allowed to play out in imagination, and creative solutions to practical problems often emerge from dialogue with unconscious figures. The technique also allows for continued psychological development throughout life, maintaining ongoing communication with deeper personality layers containing wisdom and guidance. Many individuals find that regular active imagination practice enhances creativity, emotional resilience, and self-understanding, providing a reliable method for accessing inner guidance during critical decisions. Jung's word association experiments revolutionized the understanding of unconscious psychological processes and provided initial scientific evidence for autonomous psychological complexes. In these experiments, Jung read a standardized word list to patients, meticulously measuring response time and observing emotional reactions. He noted delays, unusual responses, and signs of emotional disturbance in reaction to certain words. He discovered that specific words consistently triggered delayed responses, memory lapses, and physiological changes, revealing emotionally charged psychological material operating outside conscious control. These experiments demonstrated that the unconscious contains organized psychological structures, or complexes, which can interfere with conscious functioning. They provided objective, empirical evidence for early psychoanalytic theories about repressed psychological content, lending scientific credibility to the burgeoning field. Beyond these early experiments, Jung developed other innovative therapeutic techniques focusing on symbolic and creative expressions of the unconscious, rather than relying solely on verbal analysis. He encouraged patients to express psychological experiences through art, movement, sand play, and other creative modalities. These methods were designed to bypass rational defenses and allow unconscious contents to emerge directly, as Jung observed that many profound psychological insights cannot be adequately expressed verbally. They require symbolic or artistic expression to capture their full meaning and emotional significance. These creative approaches often reveal psychological dynamics and solutions that remain hidden when therapy focuses exclusively on verbal discussion, offering a richer, more direct pathway to the psyche. The technique of amplification became a cornerstone of Jungian therapy. It involves exploring personal psychological material through connections to cultural, mythological, and archetypal parallels. When a patient reports a significant dream, symptom, or life experience, the therapist amplifies its meaning by drawing on knowledge of similar patterns found in mythology, folklore, and religious traditions across different cultures. This approach helps patients understand their personal struggles as part of larger human experiences, not isolated problems, often providing hope and perspective during difficult psychological passages. Amplification also reveals the archetypal dimensions of personal experience, connecting individual psychological development to collective human wisdom and meaning. Jung pioneered psychological typology as a therapeutic tool for understanding personality differences and for reducing interpersonal conflicts. By helping patients understand their natural psychological preferences and inherent blind spots, therapy can foster greater balance and flexibility in their lives. Understanding type differences also significantly improves communication in relationships, as it recognizes that people process information and make decisions in fundamentally different, but not pathological, ways. This approach shifts focus from attempting to change one's core personality to developing self-acceptance and effective strategies for using natural psychological gifts while compensating for inherent limitations. Jung's most important therapeutic insight recognized the healing potential of the therapeutic relationship itself, which he understood as a mutual transformation process affecting both patient and therapist. He emphasized that therapists must be open to being changed by their encounters with patients, engaging authentically rather than hiding behind professional personas or rigid theoretical systems. This approach requires therapists to maintain ongoing attention to their own psychological development, recognizing their own complexes and projections that might inadvertently interfere with therapeutic effectiveness. Jung viewed therapy as a collaborative exploration of psychological truth, not merely expert treatment of pathological conditions, profoundly emphasizing genuine human connection as central to growth. As Carl Jung's psychological framework continued to develop, he began to make some of his most controversial discoveries. One such insight was synchronicity, his concept of meaningful coincidence. Jung defined synchronicity as the meaningful coincidence of inner psychological states with outer events, emphasizing that these occurrences cannot be explained through normal cause and effect relationships. Synchronistic experiences often manifest during times of profound psychological transition or personal crisis, arising when individuals confront important life decisions or undergo significant internal transformation. Jung believed these events suggest an underlying order and intelligence within the universe, an order that connects mind and matter in ways transcending our ordinary understanding of reality. Jung's interest in synchronicity originated from his clinical observations of patients. These individuals frequently reported meaningful coincidences during therapy, incidents that seemed to reflect or illuminate their psychological development. For example, a patient struggling with trust issues might repeatedly encounter strangers who shared intimate personal stories, or someone working on shadow integration might notice unusual references to dark or criminal themes appearing in their everyday environment. These coincidences often carried symbolic meaning directly related to the individual's current psychological situation, as if the external world were responding to and mirroring their internal psychological processes. Initially, Jung dismissed these experiences as mere chance, but he gradually recognized them as a distinct and significant psychological and potentially physical phenomenon. The concept of synchronicity profoundly challenges the Western scientific worldview, which typically assumes all events are linked by mechanical cause and effect. Jung proposed that synchronistic events reflect a causal connecting principle, a principle that links events through their shared meaning rather than through physical causation. He suggested this principle operates similarly to the archetypal patterns found in the collective unconscious, creating meaningful connections that transcend the conventional boundaries between inner psychological experience and outer physical reality. Jung posited that consciousness and matter might be two aspects of a more fundamental reality, a reality that occasionally reveals itself through synchronistic experiences, thereby uniting subjective and objective dimensions. Jung observed that synchronistic experiences often cluster when individuals are most open to unconscious contents and archetypal influences. Individuals undergoing psychological analysis, creative artists, and those facing major life transitions frequently report an increased incidence of such meaningful occurrences. These occurrences can provide guidance, confirmation, or even a warning about an individual's current life direction. Such experiences can feel like communications from a deeper intelligence, one that understands more about an individual's path than their conscious ego comprehends. Jung emphasized that synchronicity cannot be deliberately produced or controlled. It emerges spontaneously when conditions are right for meaningful connections between inner and outer experience. The practical significance of synchronicity lies in its capacity to provide meaning and guidance during periods of uncertainty. When individuals learn to recognize and respect synchronistic experiences, they often develop a greater sense of connection to larger patterns of meaning, patterns that transcend personal concerns and struggles. This awareness can provide comfort during difficult periods and fosters trust in life's unfolding process, even without clear rational answers. Jung viewed attention to synchronicity as part of developing a religious attitude toward life, an attitude that recognizes the pervasive presence of mystery and meaning beyond rational understanding. Following a period where he struggled to communicate his complex insights into psychological transformation, Jung discovered medieval alchemy. His study of this ancient tradition provided a symbolic language for understanding psychological transformation and the individuation process that conventional psychological concepts could not adequately express. Jung found that alchemical texts described transformation processes that mirrored those he observed in his patients and in his own personal development. The alchemist's quest to transform base metals into gold served as a profound metaphor. It symbolized the psychological transformation of unconscious contents into conscious awareness and the development of the integrated personality Jung termed the self. This discovery offered Jung a robust historical and symbolic framework that validated his psychological theories and provided practical guidance for understanding the stages and challenges of psychological development. Alchemical symbolism describes psychological transformation as a series of distinct operations involving the dissolution, purification, and reconstitution of psychological contents. The initial stage, known as nigredo or blackening, corresponds to confronting shadow material and the breakdown of inadequate or restrictive psychological structures. This phase often includes experiences of depression, confusion, and the disintegration of stable identity structures. Yet Jung recognized nigredo as a necessary prelude to psychological renewal. The subsequent albedo, or whitening stage, signifies the emergence of new clarity and the integration of purified psychological contents. The rubedo, or reddening, then symbolizes the final achievement of psychological wholeness and self-realization. Jung found that alchemical texts offered detailed guidance for working with the profound psychological conflicts and paradoxes inherent in the process of individuation. The alchemical principle of the union of opposites, often symbolized by the marriage of the king and queen or the hermaphrodite, directly corresponds to psychological integration. This integration includes masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, spiritual and material aspects of the personality. Alchemy's emphasis on patient observation and gradual transformation offered an alternative to quick psychological fixes, supporting Jung's belief that genuine psychological development requires time, attention, and deep respect for natural processes. The mysterious nature of alchemical operations further validated Jung's observation that psychological transformation involves elements beyond rational control. The study of alchemy helped Jung understand that psychological development has always been a central human concern, sometimes disguised in non-psychological language and imagery. Jung recognized that the alchemist's laboratory work often served as an external focus for inner psychological processes, allowing them to project and work with unconscious contents through chemical experiments and their symbolic interpretations. He further recognized that many religious, mystical, and esoteric traditions contain similar symbolic descriptions of psychological transformation, suggesting that the individuation journey is a universal human experience, not merely a modern psychological theory. This extensive historical perspective bolstered Jung's confidence that his insights reflected fundamental human truths. Jung's alchemical studies also revealed the importance of participation mystique between observer and observed in the transformative process. Alchemists believed their psychological state directly influenced the success of their operations, recognizing that transformation requires the participation of the entire personality, not merely detached intellectual analysis. This insight supported Jung's emphasis on therapy as a mutual transformation process and affirmed his belief that genuine psychological understanding requires personal engagement, not just objective observation. The alchemical tradition thus offered Jung a model for psychological work that honored both scientific understanding and the mystical recognition of transformation beyond rational control. Jung's relationship with religion and spirituality was both complex and controversial, deeply interwoven with his theories and personal development. Raised in a pastoral family, but troubled by conventional Christian doctrine, Jung sought to understand religious experience psychologically without reducing it to pathology or wishful thinking. He made a crucial distinction between religion as an organized institutional practice and religiosity as a fundamental psychological attitude that seeks connection with transcendent meaning and value. Jung believed religious experience is a natural and necessary aspect of psychological development, not merely a primitive or neurotic response to life's difficulties. Jung observed that many of his patients suffered from a spiritual problem, finding that their psychological difficulties often stemmed from a lack of meaning and connection to values greater than ego concerns. Conversely, individuals experiencing genuine religious or spiritual transformation often exhibited remarkable psychological healing that could not be explained by conventional therapeutic methods alone. These observations led Jung to conclude that the human psyche naturally seeks a relationship with the numinous, a term he used to describe sacred experiences evoking awe, reverence, and a profound connection to ultimate reality. Jung argued that suppressing these innate spiritual needs creates psychological imbalance, which contributes to many forms of mental and emotional suffering. The self-archetype provided Jung with a powerful psychological framework for understanding religious experience, without reducing it to mere projection or delusion. Symbols and experiences of self-realization often share qualities traditionally associated with religious experience, such as unity, transcendence, and absolute meaning. Jung suggested that authentic religious experience involves an encounter with the self-archetype, which represents the divine image within the human personality, rather than a projection onto external deities. This perspective allowed him to validate religious experience while maintaining a psychological, rather than purely metaphysical, understanding. Jung's approach to spirituality emphasized direct personal experience over adherence to rigid doctrines. He encouraged individuals to develop their own unique relationship with the sacred through attention to dreams, synchronicities, and other symbolic communications from the unconscious, moving beyond sole reliance on traditional religious teachings or practices. Jung believed that genuine spiritual development requires profound psychological honesty and self-confrontation, including the integration of shadow material and a frank recognition of personal limitations and contradictions. This approach often conflicted with conventional religious expectations for moral purity and idealism, instead emphasizing acceptance of human complexity and ambiguity. Jung's emphasis on the psychological reality of religious experience had profound implications for both mental health and spiritual development, as he argued that psychological problems often reflect underlying spiritual crises. He concluded that effective therapy must address the meaning-making and value-seeking aspects of human nature, not just the reduction of symptoms. Jung warned that spiritual practices that ignore psychological reality can lead to inflation, projection, and unconscious possession. His integration of psychological and spiritual perspectives offered a path to wholeness that honored both scientific understanding and contemplative wisdom. Jung's extensive study of mythology and fairy tales provided crucial evidence for the existence of the collective unconscious, revealing universal psychological patterns that underlie human experience across diverse cultures and throughout history. He discovered strikingly similar basic stories, symbols, and character types in the folklore of geographically disconnected societies, suggesting that these patterns emerge from shared psychological structures rather than solely from cultural transmission. These archetypal stories, he believed, serve as fundamental maps for universal human experiences, including growing up, falling in love, facing challenges, and discovering one's identity. Jung viewed mythology and fairy tales as humanity's collective dreams, preserving profound psychological wisdom over millennia. Fairy tales particularly fascinated Jung for their simple, direct presentation of archetypal patterns, stripped of the elaborate cultural and historical details often found in more complex mythological systems. The basic fairy tale structure, involving a young person leaving home, facing trials, receiving magical help, and achieving a profound transformation, closely mirrors the individuation process. This pattern offers valuable guidance for understanding the psychological tasks and obstacles inherent in self-realization. Jung observed that the symbolic language of fairy tales speaks directly to the unconscious, often providing insights about psychological problems that are inaccessible through purely rational analysis. His study of collective symbols revealed that archetypal images carry multiple layers of meaning, which can be understood at personal, cultural, and universal levels simultaneously. For example, the symbol of a tree might represent personal growth, cultural values, and the archetypal axis mundi, the world tree connecting heaven and earth. Jung discovered that authentic symbols cannot be artificially created or manipulated. They emerge spontaneously from the unconscious when conditions are psychologically ripe. These natural symbols possess a transcendent function that bridges conscious and unconscious contents, thereby facilitating psychological transformation and growth. Jung found that many modern individuals often suffer from symbol poverty, a profound loss of connection to the rich symbolic traditions that once provided meaning and guidance. He observed that rationalistic and materialistic modern culture tends to dismiss symbolic thinking as primitive, leaving people without adequate resources for navigating their inner experiences and major life transitions. Jung argued that this symbolic impoverishment contributes to the pervasive sense of meaninglessness and disconnection that characterizes many modern psychological problems. Jung encouraged reconnecting with the wisdom embedded in mythological and fairy tale traditions. He also advocated for an openness to new symbols that are appropriate for contemporary psychological needs. The practical application of mythological wisdom involves recognizing archetypal patterns in one's personal experience, which can then guide understanding of current psychological situations and future development. Someone struggling in a relationship, for example, might find guidance in the story of Beauty and the Beast, while a person facing career challenges might benefit from reflecting on heroes' journey narratives. Jung emphasized that these stories should not be interpreted literally, but rather as symbolic maps that provide perspective and encouragement for navigating universal human experiences. This approach helps individuals recognize their personal struggles as part of larger human patterns, showing that wisdom for these challenges is often preserved in humanity's collective stories. Jung's exploration of art and creativity highlighted their vital role in psychological development, as they offer a means to express unconscious contents that cannot be adequately communicated through rational language. He observed that creative expression often emerges from the same psychological depths as dreams and symptoms, transforming potentially disturbing unconscious material into consciously appreciated forms. Jung distinguished between two types of creative work: psychological art, which focuses on personal experience, and visionary art, which channels collective unconscious archetypes. Both serve important psychological functions, but visionary art particularly fascinated Jung because it often reveals collective psychological dynamics and can anticipate cultural developments. The mandala symbol became central to Jung's understanding of psychological wholeness and the self-archetype. Jung first encountered mandalas by spontaneously drawing circular patterns during his intense crisis after breaking with Freud. He found that the act of creating these designs provided psychological centering and helped integrate conflicting contents within his psyche. Jung later discovered that mandalas appear universally in religious art, diverse spiritual traditions, and spontaneous art created by individuals undergoing psychological transformation. He concluded they represent an archetypal pattern for organizing psychological experience around a stable center. Jung observed that mandalas naturally emerge in the artwork of individuals who are actively integrating opposing psychological forces, with the circular boundary providing a contained space for conflicting elements to harmonize. The mandala's center often contains symbols of the self or a divine presence, while the surrounding areas display psychological contents balanced relative to this organizing principle. Creating mandalas serves as both a diagnostic tool for psychological states and a therapeutic technique for integration. The process of artistic creation itself, beyond the creation of aesthetic objects, serves important psychological functions. Jung discovered that genuine creative work requires the ego to step aside, allowing unconscious contents to emerge spontaneously. This process of creative surrender and collaboration with unconscious forces provides a practical training in the ego-self relationship, a relationship that characterizes psychological maturity and wisdom. Creative work offers a safe way to explore and express threatening psychological contents, allowing for the gradual integration of shadow material and archetypal energies. Jung emphasized that the psychological value of artistic expression does not depend on technical skill, but rather on the authenticity and depth of the psychological contents expressed. Simple drawings, poems, or spontaneous creative expressions often possess more therapeutic value than technically accomplished works disconnected from genuine inner experience. Jung encouraged regular creative practice for psychological development, viewing artistic expression not as a special talent, but as a fundamental psychological function that supports growth and integration throughout life for anyone willing to engage with it. Jung's approach to mental illness profoundly differed from traditional medical models, which often viewed symptoms as biological dysfunctions to be eliminated. Instead, Jung viewed symptoms as meaningful expressions of unconscious conflicts. He observed that neurotic symptoms often serve a compensatory function, working to restore psychological balance when conscious attitudes are one-sided or when important psychological needs are ignored. Jung recognized symptoms as unconscious communications signaling a need for adjustment and growth. This perspective shifted the focus from mere symptom elimination to understanding the psychological meaning and purpose of the distress. Jung distinguished between neurosis and psychosis based on the individual's relationship to unconscious contents and the stability of ego functioning. In neurosis, the ego remains relatively intact, but conflicts with unconscious contents create symptoms such as anxiety, depression, or obsessions that interfere with daily functioning. The neurotic individual maintains an awareness of external reality, but experiences internal conflicts between conscious intentions and unconscious impulses, or between different psychological complexes. Jung viewed neurosis as a sign of an unbalanced personality that needed integration of neglected aspects for wholeness. Psychosis, in Jung's view, involved a more serious breakdown in the ego-unconscious relationship, often resulting in consciousness being flooded by archetypal material that could not be properly integrated. Crucially, Jung sought psychological significance and symbolic meaning, even in bizarre psychotic thoughts and behaviors. He observed that psychotic episodes often contain profound spiritual and archetypal themes, reflecting attempts to resolve fundamental questions about identity, meaning, and ultimate reality. This approach suggested that some mental breakdowns might be incomplete or misdirected attempts at psychological breakthrough. Jung's concept of mental health emphasized psychological wholeness and ongoing growth and adaptation, rather than merely the absence of symptoms or perfect social adjustment. Psychological health, for Jung, requires a dynamic relationship between conscious and unconscious contents, one that allows for the integration of new experiences and continued personality development. This includes accessing and expressing the full range of human psychological capacities, such as thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition, along with various archetypal energies. Jung warned that excessive psychological one-sidedness, even if socially approved, eventually leads to breakdown. The therapeutic implications of Jung's approach emphasize supporting natural healing processes and avoiding the imposition of external solutions or the elimination of all psychological discomfort. Jung believed that psychological symptoms often contain the seeds of their own resolution, and therapy should help individuals understand and work with their symptoms rather than fighting them. This approach requires patience and trust in psychological processes that may initially seem destructive. Jung's perspective offers hope by suggesting that psychological difficulties often represent attempts at growth, which can be supported through understanding and conscious engagement. Jung's understanding of projection revealed a fundamental mechanism, influencing conscious experience and relationships. Projection occurs when individuals unconsciously attribute their own unacknowledged qualities, conflicts, or potentials to others. They see in others what they cannot recognize or accept within themselves. This process operates automatically, outside conscious awareness, creating distorted perceptions of others that reflect the projector's internal state rather than the other person's actual characteristics. Jung observed that projection serves both defensive and developmental functions. It protects the ego from threatening self-knowledge while also offering opportunities for growth through its eventual withdrawal. Projection operates most powerfully when others genuinely resemble the projected content, creating a hook upon which the projection can hang. Someone repressing their own aggression, for example, might react intensely to minor assertiveness in others, or someone disowning their creative potential might feel envious or dismissive of artists. These projections often feel entirely justified and rational to the projector, making their recognition extremely difficult. Emotional intensity in relationships or reactions, particularly when its strength exceeds the actual situation, often provides a crucial clue to the presence of projection. Transference is a specific form of projection that occurs particularly in therapeutic, authority, intimacy, or dependency situations. Jung observed that patients frequently project archetypal images onto their therapists, viewing them as parental figures, wise guides, or powerful healers. These transference projections often recreate early relationship patterns and unresolved childhood conflicts, thereby providing opportunities to work through psychological wounds and develop more mature relationship capacities. Jung emphasized that transference is a natural and necessary aspect of the healing process, one to be understood and consciously worked with. Countertransference, Jung's term for the therapist's emotional reactions to the patient, is equally important but often overlooked. Jung recognized that therapists' psychological reactions provide valuable information about the unconscious dynamics at play, seeing countertransference as a valuable source of insight when approached with conscious awareness and clear boundaries. This revolutionized therapy by acknowledging the mutual psychological influence in the relationship, moving beyond a one-way expert treatment model. The recognition and conscious withdrawal of projections is crucial for psychological development and the establishment of healthy relationships. This process requires individuals to distinguish their own psychological contents from others, actual characteristics, and to take responsibility for disowned aspects of their personality instead of trying to change others. Jung observed that successful projection withdrawal often includes a period of disillusionment, where idealized or demonized others are seen realistically, followed by the challenging work of integrating the projected contents. This ultimately leads to more authentic relationships based on genuine appreciation, rather than being overshadowed by unconscious projections. Jung's encounter with Eastern philosophy profoundly influenced his understanding of consciousness and psychological development. Beginning in the 1920s, Jung extensively studied Hindu, Buddhist, and Taoist texts, finding striking parallels with his own emerging insights. He recognized these traditions not merely as religions, but as sophisticated psychological systems offering practical guidance for inner consciousness. This cross-cultural perspective validated Jung's theories and significantly expanded his understanding of human potential. The Hindu concept of the self as the ultimate reality underlying individual consciousness provided a powerful framework for Jung's self-archetype. Jung found remarkable similarities between his observations of self-realization and Hindu descriptions of discovering one's true nature beyond the ego. Both traditions emphasize that psychological maturity requires recognizing the illusory nature of the ego and identifying with a more universal consciousness. However, Jung maintained that his approach differed from traditional Hindu philosophy by focusing on unconscious integration within the individual psyche, rather than transcendence of the individual. Buddhist teachings on suffering, attachment, and liberation resonated deeply with Jung's understanding of neurosis and psychological conflict. The Buddhist analysis of mental suffering arising from clinging to fixed ideas or desires paralleled Jung's observations on how psychological rigidity causes inner conflicts. Buddhist emphasis on mindful awareness and non-judgmental observation also influenced Jung's therapeutic techniques. Furthermore, Jung appreciated the Buddhist middle way philosophy, which avoids extremes and seeks balance, as compatible with his own concept of integrating psychological opposites. Taoist philosophy offered Jung profound insights into the flow of psychological energy and the concept of wu wei, or effortless action, which aligns with natural processes rather than forcing outcomes through willful control. The Taoist concept of yin and yang, representing complementary opposites, strongly influenced Jung's understanding that psychological transformation occurs through integrating opposing forces, not through the victory of one side over the other. Jung found Taoist emphasis on natural rhythms to be highly relevant for psychological development and the timing of therapeutic interventions. The Taoist ideal of the sage, who lives in harmony with the natural order, provided a model of psychological maturity emphasizing wisdom and responsiveness. Despite his deep appreciation for Eastern traditions, Jung believed that Westerners needed to discover their own authentic path to wholeness. He warned against the dangers of psychic inflation that could arise from premature or superficial identification with Eastern spiritual ideals. Jung emphasized that genuine psychological transformation requires confronting one's cultural conditioning and personal shadow, rather than escaping into exotic spiritual practices for temporary relief. His integration of Eastern and Western perspectives thus created a unique approach to psychological development that honored both scientific understanding and contemplative wisdom, all grounded in practical therapeutic work. Jung's insights into individual psychology extended to profound observations about group dynamics and cultural phenomena. He recognized that archetypal patterns, which influence individual development, also operate powerfully at collective levels, creating shared myths, values, and behavioral patterns that define group identity and collective action. Jung observed that cultures, much like individuals, possess both conscious values and a collective shadow. Understanding these group psychological dynamics is essential for comprehending social conflicts, and his analysis provided a framework for how individual and collective psychological health are deeply interconnected. The concept of the collective shadow helps explain phenomena like social prejudice, scapegoating, and intergroup conflict. Groups often project their collective shadow onto other ethnicities, religions, or nations, allowing them to maintain an idealized self-image while attributing all negative qualities to external enemies. Jung observed that collective projections intensify dramatically during times of social stress or uncertainty, as groups seek simple explanations for complex problems and identifiable targets for their fears. Jung's analysis of mass movements revealed how powerful archetypal energies are activated at a collective level. Successful political leaders often embody or activate potent archetypal images, such as the wise father or savior hero, which resonate deeply with unconscious collective needs and fantasies. When populations become possessed by these archetypal energies without conscious understanding, destructive collective behaviors can easily occur. Jung's analysis of Nazism, for instance, illustrated a profound collective psychological regression where primitive archetypal forces overwhelmed rational consciousness. The phenomenon of participation mystique, operates powerfully in group settings, creating an unconscious psychological merging that can enhance creativity and solidarity or lead to a dangerous loss of individual judgment. Jung observed that individuals often lose independent critical thinking when they become over-identified with group consciousness, allowing collective emotions and opinions to override personal values and rational analysis. This psychological fusion can foster strong solidarity within teams or facilitate mob behavior and violence. Understanding participation mystique is crucial for explaining both the positive potential and the dangerous risks inherent in collective human endeavors. Jung emphasized that healthy cultural development requires conscious awareness and integration, much like individual maturity. Cultures need to recognize and integrate their collective shadows rather than projecting them onto other groups, and they must develop the capacity to hold paradox and complexity, instead of seeking oversimplified social solutions. This process requires conscious individuals who can resist collective possession and maintain independent judgment, thereby contributing constructively to group goals and cooperation. Jung viewed conscious individual development as absolutely essential for cultural progress, believing that integrated individuals help groups navigate psychological challenges without succumbing to archetypal possession. Jung's personal crisis and the creation of the Red Book, which spanned from 1913 to 1930, represents an extraordinary example of self-analysis and profound inner exploration. Following his definitive break with Freud, Jung entered a period of intense psychological turmoil, which he termed his confrontation with the unconscious. Instead of seeking external help, Jung deliberately engaged in a direct dialogue with unconscious contents through a method he called active imagination. This profound journey into his psychological depths provided the experiential foundation for all his subsequent theoretical contributions. The Red Book, originally titled Liber Novus, or New Book, chronicles Jung's encounters with a series of autonomous unconscious figures. These included personalities such as Philemon, Salome, and Elijah, who appeared to possess independent existence and wisdom. Jung engaged in extended conversations with these inner figures, questioning them about the nature of reality, consciousness, and purpose, and carefully recorded their responses and insights. These dialogues often challenged Jung's rational beliefs and forced him to confront aspects of human experience that could not be understood through scientific materialism alone. The inner figures served as teachers and guides, helping Jung navigate the treacherous terrain of the unconscious while maintaining his ego stability. Jung's method involved a state of relaxed concentration, allowing spontaneous images and scenarios to emerge from the unconscious. He then engaged with these contents as if they were real, autonomous beings. He often began by asking direct questions and was frequently surprised by the profound wisdom of the responses, discovering that these inner personalities possessed knowledge his conscious mind could not generate. This suggested they were genuine autonomous psychological functions, not mere fantasies. The entire process required tremendous courage due to the potentially disturbing or challenging material that emerged from these deep unconscious explorations. The Red Book contains not only Jung's written dialogues, but also elaborate artistic representations of his visions and experiences. Jung created intricate illuminated manuscripts with detailed drawings, paintings, and calligraphy, attempting to capture the visual and symbolic dimensions of his inner experiences. These artistic expressions served both as records and as active imagination techniques, deepening his engagement with the symbolic contents. This unique combination of dialogue and art documented Jung's profound individuation process and later provided essential source material for his theories on archetypes, psychological types, and the structure of the unconscious. Jung kept the Red Book largely secret for most of his life, sharing it only with a few close associates and never publishing it, fearing that revealing his radical explorations might damage his scientific credibility. The Red Book was finally published in 2009, nearly 50 years after Jung's death, allowing the world to see the experiential foundation of his analytical psychology. This extraordinary document demonstrates that Jung's insights emerged from a direct encounter with the deepest layers of his own consciousness, providing compelling evidence for the existence of the unconscious and the possibility of conscious dialogue with autonomous psychological contents. Jung's analysis of the UFO phenomenon, detailed in his work, Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies, represents a fascinating exploration of how archetypal contents manifest in contemporary culture during times of collective crisis. Jung approached UFOs as a psychologist, primarily interested in why so many people reported similar visionary experiences. He observed that UFO sightings increased dramatically during periods of social tension and uncertainty, suggesting that they might represent projections of unconscious psychological contents onto external phenomena. Jung's analysis revealed that UFO experiences often carry symbolic meanings similar to traditional religious visions and archetypal dreams, indicating their emergence from the same psychological depths that produce spiritual and transformative experiences. The circular shape of most reported UFOs immediately drew Jung's attention, connecting them to mandala symbolism and the self-archetype. Jung observed that individuals undergoing psychological transformation spontaneously draw circular patterns or are drawn to round symbols. He theorized that UFO sightings might be collective projections of the self-archetype, emerging when humanity experiences a deep need for symbols of unity and transcendence. The luminous quality of UFOs further links them to traditional religious symbolism of divine light and spiritual illumination, suggesting they carry numinous meaning and speak to deep human needs for connection with a transcendent reality. Jung observed that UFO experiences often occur to individuals in states of personal psychological crisis or transformation, and witnesses frequently report feelings of awe, fear, and spiritual significance, resembling encounters with the divine. Jung also noted that UFO abduction accounts often resemble shamanic initiations or mystical journeys, involving encounters with otherworldly beings who provide special knowledge or transformation. These parallels suggested that UFO experiences are modern visionary forms serving the same psychological functions as ancient encounters with the divine or supernatural. The technological appearance of UFOs, Jung argued, reflects the contemporary cultural context of these archetypal projections. He recognized that archetypal contents manifest through symbols that are meaningful within their historical setting. In an age dominated by scientific materialism and technological advancement, the human need for transcendent experience expresses itself through technological imagery. UFOs, therefore, represent a compromise between the rational scientific worldview and the enduring human need for mystery and meaning, connecting with forces greater than individual human existence. Jung's UFO analysis demonstrates how psychological projections become intensified during collective crises, especially when existing cultural symbols fail to provide adequate meaning and guidance. The post-World War II era, with its unprecedented technological power and the looming threat of nuclear weapons, created deep collective anxiety. UFO sightings, Jung concluded, provided an outlet for the collective unconscious to express fears about technological destruction and hopes for salvation through superior wisdom. Jung viewed the UFO phenomenon as a symptom of humanity's need for new symbols and stories that could navigate the challenges of technological civilization, while maintaining a vital connection to deeper meaning. The senex and pure archetypes represent a significant psychological opposition identified by Jung, embodying the tension between youth and age, innovation and tradition, spontaneity and structure. This dynamic tension characterizes both individual development and broader cultural dynamics. The pure eternus, or eternal youth, archetype represents the part of human nature that remains young, creative, and full of potential, yet often struggles with commitment, discipline, and practical adult responsibilities. The senex, or wise old man, archetype embodies wisdom, experience, structure, and the capacity for long-term planning, but can become rigid, pessimistic, and resistant to change and innovation. Understanding the dynamic relationship between these archetypal energies is crucial for navigating life transitions, engaging in creative work, and balancing freedom with responsibility in individuals and society. The pure archetype manifests in individuals with youthful enthusiasm, exceptional creativity, and visionary insight. They often possess an almost magical ability to inspire others with dreams and possibilities. Pure-dominated personalities frequently display talent, charisma, and an ability to see beyond conventional limitations, imagining new ways of living and creating. However, the shadow side of the pure includes a profound difficulty with commitment, a tendency to abandon projects that become routine, and a resistance to the practical work required for manifesting creative visions. Pure individuals may also struggle with addiction, relationship instability, and chronic dissatisfaction, as they search for perfect experiences that match their idealistic visions but are consistently disappointed by reality. The senex archetype provides the complementary energy of wisdom, discipline, and the capacity to build lasting structures that preserve cultural achievements across generations. Senex-dominated individuals excel at strategic thinking, long-term planning, and patient work required for developing expertise, thereby making meaningful contributions to society. They often serve as mentors, teachers, and guardians of tradition, helping younger generations learn from past mistakes and build upon established accomplishments. The shadow side of the senex includes excessive rigidity, a pervasive pessimism about change, and a tendency to suppress youthful enthusiasm through harsh criticism and impossibly high standards. Jung observed that healthy psychological development requires integrating both pure and senex energies, avoiding complete identification with either archetypal position. The integrated individual maintains the pure's creativity, enthusiasm, and openness to possibilities, while also developing the senex's wisdom, discipline, and capacity for sustained effort and commitment. This integration is especially important during midlife, when individuals must learn to honor both their youthful dreams and their accumulated wisdom. The creative tension between pure and senex energies can generate innovative solutions that combine visionary thinking with practical wisdom, thereby avoiding the pure's impractical fantasy and the senex's resistance to necessary change. The pure senex dynamic also operates powerfully at cultural and generational levels, creating ongoing tensions between innovation and tradition that drive cultural evolution. Societies need pure energy to challenge existing structures and envision new possibilities, but they also need senex energy to preserve valuable traditions and provide stable foundations. Generational conflicts often reflect this archetypal tension between pure and senex, as younger generations seek to overthrow established ways, while older generations strive to preserve accumulated wisdom. Understanding this archetypal dimension of social conflict can help reduce animosity and promote constructive dialogue between generational perspectives, recognizing that both innovation and tradition serve essential developmental functions. Jung's concept of the psychoid archetype represents a sophisticated and deeply profound insight into the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. In his later years, Jung speculated that archetypes might exist not merely as psychological patterns, but also as organizing principles that operate in both mental and physical domains. This revolutionary idea suggested that the archetypal patterns observed in dreams, myths, and human psychology might reflect deeper structural principles that govern the organization of matter and energy throughout the universe. The psychoid archetype concept thus anticipated contemporary discussions in consciousness studies and quantum physics, foreseeing the possibility of mind and matter being two aspects of a more fundamental, unified reality. Jung's profound interest in the psyche-matter relationship was significantly stimulated by his collaboration with the renowned physicist Wolfgang Pauli on the phenomenon of synchronicity. Through extensive correspondence and shared research, Jung and Pauli explored how psychological and physical events could be connected through underlying patterns that transcend conventional subjective and objective distinctions. They observed that quantum mechanical phenomena seemed to involve the role of consciousness, challenging the purely materialistic assumptions of classical physics. Jung wondered if the archetypal patterns he discerned in psychological experience were, in fact, the same organizing principles at work in the physical universe. The psychoid hypothesis suggests that archetypes exist in a psychophysically neutral realm, manifesting as psychological patterns for consciousness and as physical patterns for matter and energy. This idea helps explain why archetypal symbols appear consistently in human psychology, in the formation of crystals, in biological systems, and even in fundamental mathematical relationships. Jung speculated that consciousness and matter might be two different ways of experiencing the same underlying archetypal reality, thereby offering a bridge between scientific materialism and psychological or spiritual understanding. It suggests that both describe complementary aspects of a unified reality. Jung's psychoid concept has profound implications for understanding synchronicity and meaningful coincidences. If archetypal patterns operate in both the psychological and physical domains, then synchronistic experiences might be moments where this underlying unity of mind and matter becomes temporarily visible to consciousness. This explains why synchronicities involve external events mirroring internal states, as if the same archetypal pattern is expressing itself simultaneously through consciousness and through physical circumstances. The psychoid archetype concept suggests that these experiences reflect genuine mind-matter connections, not merely subjective projection. Contemporary research in quantum physics, consciousness studies, and systems theory continues to reveal parallels with Jung's psychoid concept, suggesting that Jung was remarkably ahead of his time in recognizing the inadequacy of strict mind-matter dualism. Fields like quantum field theory, morphic resonance, and information theory are now exploring the idea of pattern as a fundamental aspect of reality. Jung's psychoid archetype concept provides a powerful psychological framework for understanding these developments and offers crucial insights into their implications for human consciousness and spiritual experience. This perspective offers hope for an integrated understanding of reality that honors both scientific knowledge and psychological wisdom, recognizing their common foundational principles. Jung's philosophy of the symbolic life represents his mature understanding of how individuals can connect their consciousness to deeper meaning and purpose. He observed that modern civilization had largely lost touch with symbolic thinking and the capacity to recognize meaningful patterns that connect individual experience to larger cosmic and spiritual realities. Jung believed that living symbolically involves an acute awareness of the deeper significance underlying everyday experiences, seeing ordinary events as expressions of archetypal patterns and universal themes. This symbolic attitude allows individuals to connect to transcendent dimensions of existence while still functioning practically in the material world. Jung carefully distinguished between signs, which represent known realities and convey literal information, and symbols, which point to unknown realities, often expressed through metaphor and paradox. Living symbolically, therefore, means recognizing when experiences carry a symbolic significance that goes beyond their literal meaning, thereby opening doorways to deeper understanding. This requires cultivating a symbolic attitude, one that is open to multiple layers of meaning, instead of reducing everything to rational categories and practical functions. The symbolic life involves paying close attention to dreams, synchronicities, and other manifestations from the unconscious, which can provide guidance beyond rational analysis. Jung encouraged personal rituals, creative practices, and contemplative activities as ways to stay connected to these symbolic dimensions. This might include dream journaling, engaging in artistic expression, spending time in nature, or participating in spiritual practices that honor mystery. The goal is not to abandon rational thinking, but to supplement it with symbolic awareness, which provides access to wisdom from deeper psychological and spiritual sources. Jung observed that individuals who lost their connection to symbolic meaning often experienced spiritual poverty, a profound sense of meaninglessness and disconnection that even external success could not remedy. Without symbolic meaning, life can become a series of mechanical routines, failing to nourish the human need for purpose and transcendent value. The symbolic life serves as a powerful antidote, helping individuals recognize the sacred dimensions in ordinary experience and maintain connection to the eternal patterns that give life meaning. This approach does not require adherence to specific religious beliefs, but rather cultivates an attitude of reverence and wonder toward existence itself. Living symbolically involves recognizing that one's personal experiences participate in larger archetypal patterns, which connect individual development to universal human themes and cosmic processes. For instance, a person struggling with a difficult relationship might see it as embodying the tension between freedom and commitment, while someone facing career challenges might view it as part of the hero's journey narrative. This symbolic perspective provides comfort and guidance, showing that individual struggles are often part of larger, meaningful patterns. The symbolic life thus honors both rational intelligence and intuitive wisdom, maintaining an essential openness to the mystery that makes human existence profoundly meaningful. Jung's typology system offers invaluable insights for understanding relationships, enhancing team effectiveness, and navigating conflicts and complementarities. Each psychological type brings unique strengths and perspectives to relationships, but these differences can also create profound misunderstandings when individuals do not appreciate other valid approaches to life. Understanding type dynamics helps explain repeating relationship patterns and clarifies why teams function differently. This knowledge can transform potentially destructive differences into opportunities for mutual learning and enhanced effectiveness. In romantic relationships, type differences often create both initial attraction and ongoing challenges. Opposite types frequently attract, as they offer psychological qualities the other person lacks or has underdeveloped. For example, an introverted thinking type might be drawn to an extroverted feeling type for their emotional warmth and social connection, while the feeling type benefits from the thinking type's logical analysis. However, these very differences can become frustrating when partners expect fundamental personality changes in the other. Successful relationships between different types require psychological generosity, which is the capacity to appreciate a partner's natural functioning, even if it is different from one's own. It involves communicating respectfully of type differences and avoiding attempts to force an unfamiliar approach. Introverted partners often need alone time to process and decide, while extroverted partners typically need to process verbally. Couples understanding these differences can create relationship structures that honor both partners' needs. Team effectiveness, Jung observed, fundamentally depends on psychological diversity to ensure all necessary functions and perspectives are represented. Effective teams ideally include thinking types for objective analysis, feeling types for human impact and values, sensing types for attention to details, and intuitive types for exploring possibilities and future implications. Teams dominated by similar types may excel in some areas, but often have significant blind spots, leading to imbalanced or poor decisions. Understanding type dynamics helps leaders assign roles, structure communication, and resolve conflicts that arise from type misunderstandings. The practical application of type awareness moves beyond mere categorization to a genuine appreciation of each type's unique gifts. Individuals can use typological understanding to identify areas where they might need support and opportunities to develop their less preferred functions. This approach fosters conscious relationships, where differences become resources for mutual enhancement. Teams and couples that integrate type awareness often report improved communication, reduced conflict, and enhanced creativity, as they learn to leverage psychological diversity rather than fighting it. Jung's profound influence extends far beyond his original theories, continually evolving through contemporary applications across various fields. His seminal insights on the unconscious, psychological types, archetypes, and the individuation process are widely integrated into modern therapeutic approaches, educational systems, and organizational development programs globally. Modern Jungian analysis continues to develop his methods, incorporating new understandings of trauma, neuroscience, and cultural diversity, thereby demonstrating the ongoing relevance and adaptability of his core insights. Jung's emphasis on meaning, spirituality, and wholeness provided vital alternatives to purely medical or behavioral healing approaches, highlighting the human need for purpose. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, a widely used personality assessment, popularized Jung's theory of psychological types, making it accessible to millions in business, education, and personal development contexts. While these applications sometimes oversimplify Jung's complex understanding, they have nonetheless helped countless individuals and organizations appreciate personality differences and improve communication. Contemporary type theory has expanded upon Jung's original formulations to include cultural variations and developmental aspects, offering a more nuanced understanding of how types manifest in different life and professional contexts. Widespread typological thinking has contributed significantly to greater acceptance of psychological diversity, reducing the tendency to pathologize natural differences in information processing and decision-making. Jung's insights on trauma, complexes, and compensatory functions have deeply influenced modern trauma therapy and family systems work. His understanding that psychological symptoms often contain important psychological information has supported the development of collaborative therapeutic relationships that honor client wisdom and natural healing processes. Contemporary therapists integrate Jungian concepts and techniques, such as active imagination, dream work, and creative expression, recognizing their value for accessing psychological material that may be resistant to purely verbal approaches. The Jungian emphasis on the therapeutic relationship as a mutual transformation has also profoundly influenced relational and humanistic therapy, which prioritize authentic human connection over technical intervention. Modern applications of Jung's work extend to organizational development, leadership training, and social change initiatives, addressing collective psychological dynamics and cultural transformation. Understanding archetypal patterns, shadow projection, and collective complexes helps leaders work effectively with group dynamics and address cultural resistance to change. Environmental psychology, conflict resolution, and social justice work increasingly incorporate Jungian insights to address how unconscious psychological forces influence collective behavior and how conscious integration can promote meaningful social change. The growing global interest in mindfulness, spirituality, and holistic development reflects Jung's prescient recognition that purely rational and materialistic worldviews cannot adequately address fundamental human needs for meaning and connection. Jung's most important legacy is perhaps his demonstration that psychology can embrace both scientific rigor and a profound respect for human mystery. His integration of empirical observation with mythological wisdom created a comprehensive approach to understanding the human psyche that remains remarkably relevant for navigating contemporary challenges. Jung's emphasis on consciousness development, shadow integration, and meaning-making provides crucial guidance for navigating complexity and maintaining connection to deeper sources of wisdom. His vision of individuation, not just as personal fulfillment, but as a fundamental service to collective human development, offers enduring hope that individual psychological growth contributes directly to creating a more conscious and humane world.